back like we never left. It's Double Move Sports. As always, I'm Stef Albiero. I'm here with the fantasy phenom, the off-season perfect rebuild for every team grinder, the man himself, Alex Lott. And we're here today to talk Dynasty. The regular season's over. Redraft season is over. It was touch and go a little bit there at the end, Alex. The grind was real, especially in the longest NFL season that's ever happened. On top of injuries, COVID, so much happening, so much changing every single week. I'm honestly a little relieved. I'm taking a deep breath. I'm looking at all the data over the course of the season, looking at all these rookies performed. All of that means we are now in Dynasty season. It's time to talk rookie values. It's time to talk player values. And this is the time of the year where you can make some really big moves. So, Alex, we're going to get into some players today, but you ready to get into this thing?
Yeah, I mean, you said most of what I wanted to say, Steph, so I echo your comments there, but it is good to be back. I mean, we did take a short break as we celebrate these regular season fantasy football championships. We're back better than ever. I know for you and I, the off-season content, the Dynasty content, talking about the rookies, talking about some of the potential free agent moves and signings and things like that, it's the most fun that we have on the show, and our Discord is continually popping off, asking Dynasty questions already as the regular season has ended. So it's going to be an absolute blast. We're going to have tons coming out on the channel, and we're back. And again, if you haven't joined that Discord that I mentioned, it's in the link below, and that's where you can get involved in Dynasty leagues with us. You can ask questions and just really engage in an amazing DMS community. So Steph, let's go ahead and get into this. We're going to do some buy, sell, or hold Dynasty edition. We have 6 or 7 names we're going to get through today, depending on time, but some very, very, very tough names on this list. It's going to be an absolute blast.
No, this is the time of the year. I'll put the graphic on screen. I can't remember who put this graphic together.
If it was you, just comment and we'll pin the comment and give you some credit.
Good call. But this is the time of the year where rookie pick values start to really, really ramp up. People take looks at their roster and say, what happened over the course of the season? What do I need to do? Does this team need to be gutted and go into a full rebuild? Should I push all my chips in and sell off all my picks and buy veterans and become a true contender for 2022? Well, this is the time of the season where you need to be careful buying running backs and quarterbacks because they're the most volatile positions as far as a path to volume. One running back draft pick, one free agent signing can crush their value. And just last year, we saw, for example, Melvin Gordon coming off an RB14 fantasy performance in 2020. The Broncos draft Javonte Williams. And then that already tanked dynasty value, tanked even harder for Melvin Gordon. So hopefully you weren't stuck holding the bag on him coming off a high-end RB2 fantasy season. We saw Josh Jacobs' usage get pulled back at the beginning of the year when the Raiders went out and signed Kenyon Drake in free agency. His dynasty value took a huge hit because people thought it might be a 50-50 split, didn't know what that usage was going to look like. They paid Kenyon Drake some pretty big money to come into that backfield, and so the questions start popping up. You have situations like the Aaron Rodgers Jeopardy situation. You have Russell Wilson asking for a trade. All these things can change the landscape in a snap. So be careful, especially with veteran running backs, going and buying them right now.
One thing I want to say, you mentioned Melvin Gordon and Josh Jacobs, and if you're listening, watching, you might say, hey, well, Melvin Gordon had a pretty good year. He helped my team. Josh Jacobs actually had a pretty good year as well. These guys were, and Josh Jacobs ended up as a low-end RB1. Melvin Gordon, off the top of my head, I want to say he was a pretty high-end RB2. So these guys were okay for your team this year. But Steph, I know what you're really talking about is the value, and these guys are only worth what the league perceives them to be worth. So honestly, they probably helped your team this season. But in Dynasty, one of the key things we always talk about is moving on from these veterans at the right time and maximizing their value to get into younger assets. So now we're only 1 year further down the line with Melvin Gordon, further down the line with Josh Jacobs. And I know Josh Jacobs is still pretty young. He's still on that rookie contract. But if you get caught, to your point, Steph, holding the bag with these guys, you don't want to pull a Todd Gurley situation. If you were holding him after Atlanta and you end up losing a dynasty asset for nothing, you want to move on from these guys when you can still get young players, rookie pick value in return. So if you held Melvin Gordon, Josh Jacobs, and they won you a championship, fantastic, but it's time to start thinking about moving those guys. And with these free agent running backs, like one for me, I had Kenyon Drake, and it's risky. I had Kenyon Drake. I had the chance to move him before free agency, and I thought, hey, maybe he'll go to the Jets. Maybe he'll go to Atlanta. Maybe he'll go to a workhorse situation. Turns out that he takes a backup job, and that absolutely tanked his value. Ended up trading him for pennies this year. So with these running backs, it's risky, and you can try to buy into some of these potential free agents. Watch the perfect offseason videos that I'll be coming out with. We'll do some free agent recaps on the channel as well, so you know who is scheduled to hit the open market. But it's risky, and you're really placing your bets in interesting places if you try to take some of these pending free agent running backs, quarterbacks, or even wide receivers.
Quarterback's brutal too, because there's a tie to what happens in the front office with which way that quarterback situation is going to pan out. We have this year, right, a relatively limited rookie class of quarterbacks coming in. There's no true Trevor Lawrence caliber type prospect. I don't even think there's necessarily a Justin Fields or Trey Lance type prospect in this draft. So we have a dead zone of these quarterbacks that probably won't go within the first 5 to 10 draft picks. And then they landed these kind of mid-rebuilding teams like the Falcons. The Falcons could choose to trade Matt Ryan. They could have a quarterback come in the draft and have a rookie sit behind Matt Ryan for a year. But when at the second that trigger gets pulled on that draft pick, the value, now Matt Ryan's probably a bad example because he doesn't have much value right now. But another one would be like Tua Tagovailoa. He's on the hot seat. Brian Flores is getting fired. They're making some changes in the front office. You don't want to get stuck holding the bag on a streamable quarterback too, that the second they go out and draft somebody like Trey Lance in the Jimmy G situation, even if the guy's going to sit for a year, the value in Dynasty tanks immediately. But Alex, let's talk about an exciting player, a rookie who I think you and I really nailed the value on this season, and it's Amon-Ra St Brown, a league winner in redraft, a league winner in some Dynasty lineups, coming off an insane stretch to end the season, 10-plus targets over the last 6 games, scored in all but one of the games in that stretch, finished the season as the wide receiver 23 in fantasy points per game amongst all wide receivers that played 8 or more games in 2021, and he got there after a slow start to the year. He didn't reach 14 fantasy points even one time prior to week 13.
Yeah, Steph, if we're going through our exercise here of buy, sell, or hold, I know this is going to sound crazy to a lot of people, but Amon-Ra St Brown is a sell to me because the value is sky high right now, and he was in an absolute funneled volume situation. We look at his season. I mean, on the Detroit Lions, you don't know what to expect, but 119 targets, turning that into 90 for 912 and 5 on the Detroit Lions. Absolutely incredible season. But when you think about what happened with this team, we saw the stretch run. TJ Hawkinson went down. DeAndre Swift went down. Even like Quintez Cephas went down to injury. And there was no one left. They had to funnel all of the volume to their playmaker, which was Amon-Ra St Brown. We really did see him get ramped up the back half of his rookie season, which we often do see from rookie wide receivers. But right now, the value is sky high, and I want to give him credit because I'm not saying he's not a good player. I think he is a dynasty asset that will be wide receiver 2 range for the majority of his career. I mean, you look at these players, and when they're put in the situation Amon-Ra was put in, you want to see them rise to the occasion, step up and produce, and that's exactly what he did. But Detroit is going to be looking at wide receivers in the free agent market. They're going to be looking at wide receivers in the draft. And the second that the Detroit Lions offense has a 1A, 1B situation with Amon-Ra on somebody else, that volume is going to come down. That upside is going to come down. So I'm not saying I don't like Amon-Ra St. Brown in Dynasty, but what you can get for him right now is absolutely insane. In our home Dynasty League, Steph, I just traded Amon-Ra St. Brown and a second-round pick for Stephon Diggs. So that is the kind of value you can get for a young receiver that just had a breakout rookie campaign. And that's why he's a sell. Not because I don't like him, but just because the value's through the roof.
And with these low-end wide receiver 2 flex type names, they're a dime a dozen. There's so many of them, especially in super flex leagues where those quarterbacks and running backs and even tight ends, especially in tight end premium, are those core assets where you can have a stable of 5 to 7 wide receivers that you can stream based on matchup. Maybe one guy gets hot out of nowhere. We see that all the time throughout the season. One injury is all it takes for a guy to see a path to volume. And it's funny you mentioned the Stephon Diggs deal because I also made a deal to acquire Stephon Diggs involving Amon-Ra St. Brown. I traded Chase Edmonds, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and a late 2022 first-round pick for Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, and Chuba Hubbard. After the CMC questions started arising in the headlines pretty recently. So I'm pretty excited about that deal. That is a roster where I am a contender, trying to push my chips in, finish second in that league. So trying to get Diggs and make a push. But if you go back and look at our analysis after the NFL draft, you and I had Amon-Ra St. Brown over Kadarius Toney, over Michael Carter, and it was for the exact reason that you just went through about that path to volume. It was such an easy case to make because coming into the season, the Lions had the worst wide receiver group in the entire NFL. And I remember during the draft, we said, whoever the Lions draft is going to be a smash year one. Now, they were rumored at the time to go after a Jalen Waddle with a top 10 draft pick, a Devonta Smith, a Rashad Bateman, maybe even a Rondale or Elijah Moore in the second round. They end up going with Penei Sewell in the first round. They get Amon-Ra on day 3, which was a bit disappointing. The 4th-round draft capital isn't ideal. But Amon-Ra, like you said, he is a good player. He had a good profile, was commanding a 20% target share as early as a freshman at USC, competing with NFL caliber talent in Michael Pittman, Drake London, who will be coming out in this year's class. He was an early declare. He improved every year of his college career in all of the counting stats that you look for. So this is not an indictment on Amon-Ra St. Brown, but what this is a value accrual play. This is, hey, congratulations, you hit on a late second-round pick in most SUPERFLEX rookie drafts. Go ahead and turn him into a proven veteran that can help you get over that hump. Turn him into an early second. Go and accrue value on that roster because you made a smart draft pick decision in an area with a lot of landmines like Trey Sermon, Terrace Marshall. So congratulations on the Amon-Ra St. Brown pick. Take your victory lap. Sell him high right now while the hype is real. The fantasy points are up on that board. And we've seen this situation happen before where these rookies get funneled volume situations and they get overvalued. Look at Brandon Ayuk last year. A guy that I was all in on. I think you and I both agree the talent is still there, but we did see his numbers get really inflated because Debo and Kittle were out. Same thing with Laviska Shenault. Last year, had a great stretch to end the 2020 season. You and I were all over him in redraft. Probably one of our biggest misses, honestly, because he wasn't able to maintain that spike in production. And so for both Ayuk and Shenault, their values have done nothing but decrease this year. So go ahead and get out on Amon-Ra early. Sell him high right now before we get into draft season and the mock drafts start coming out with the Lions taking a wide receiver. The questions start popping up about their quarterback situation. So I think we're in line on ASB.
But Steph, now let's move on to an older guy, a more veteran guy. It's Allen Robinson. I think of all the receivers in the league, maybe Kenny Golladay, you could argue, had his value tank harder than Allen Robinson, but it's a disappointing season. He's playing on the franchise tag in Chicago. There's quarterback turmoil. And A-Rob just disappointed in every single facet. He battled injuries, and he might have been the biggest non-injury bust I can remember in fantasy football in a long time. So, Steph, Allen Robinson, what do? You buy, do you sell, or do you hold this offseason? He's age 28 right now, going to be 29 during the 2022 season.
He is a buy for me because I think the value that you're going to have to give up to get him is worth it because people aren't asking a lot for him at the moment. I'd be willing to give up an early to mid second round rookie pick in SUPERFLEX leagues to go out and acquire Allen Robinson if I need some more depth in my wide receiver room, especially if I'm a contender. Really the formula is go and get your young ascending running backs, get your 2 stud QBs for that SUPERFLEX and starting quarterback slot, and then just fill in the rest with buy low, veteran wide receivers. And when you have these second contract wide receivers with years of proven production, you have to look past the one bad season and buy low for that bounce back. And if you've been using this type of strategy in the past couple of years, you would have gotten Stephon Diggs when, before he went over to the Buffalo Bills. You would have gotten Robert Woods, really just old, reliable, always producing, but not a sexy name, not a guy that's going to be a league winner, but definitely a startable every single week fantasy option. Tyler Lockett fits this bill. He had some years where he was battling with injury, wasn't on the field a ton, was playing second on the depth chart. And he's a guy that I think could also be a buy low right now. And even Cooper Kupp. Like, a lot of people bought Cooper Kupp because he wasn't the sexy name. He's an older wide receiver. Everyone thinks he's splitting this 50-50 volume with Robert Woods. And even if all those things are true, what you had to give up to get Cooper Kupp before this year wasn't a ton. So now we look at A-Rob. He's done with the franchise tag. I don't think he ever wanted to be in Chicago for another year. Chicago had all the struggles. They already went and cleared their front office, got rid of Ryan Pace, got rid of Matt Nagy. A-Rob himself dealt with injury. If I'm him, I'm thinking, why even push it going into my third contract at age 28? I believe whatever team brings in Allen Robinson knows what they're getting in him and is signing him to be their Alpha X wide receiver, just like the Chicago Bears did. Because we're talking about a player with 151 targets and over 1,200 receiving yards in 2020 with Foles and Trubisky under center. He has 4 150-plus target seasons on his resume, 3 seasons over 1,100 yards, 3 fantasy wide receiver 1 seasons in PPR leagues. So this is a guy that I'm willing to put this bad year behind him because he has such a long sample size of proven production at the highest level.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the things you're saying, Steph. But to me, like Allen Robinson, I'm not buying him, and it's because I'm nervous. It's because I'm nervous, and I know there was injury, I know there was poor performance, but like this is next level bad performance from A-Rob last season. Not only was he hurt, but the efficiency was terrible. I mean, 38 receptions for 410 yards and 1 touchdown in 12 games, and that's on 66 targets. Not even the catch rate is that good. To me, like I'm worried that Allen Robinson is crossing a threshold from a performance perspective, and we're seeing an early decline from him in his career. And I know a lot of things were working against him this season. I know there's a chance for a bounce back. I have him on a dynasty roster, and I'm hopeful, but I'm nervous to buy him, especially for an early to even mid-second round pick, and that's what makes him a hold to me. I have him in a league, and there's leagues where I don't have him. In the league where I have Allen Robinson, if you offered me the 203 in a SUPERFLEX, I'd probably say no and wait it out. But in the leagues where I don't have Allen Robinson, I'm not offering a 203 for Allen Robinson. I'm just going to hold and see what happens. And obviously roster construction comes into play, but I'm just going to hold and see what happens, see what team he goes to. And he probably cost himself some money this season because of the level of his performance. So I know you mentioned some guys that have had dips in the past. Stephon Diggs is a perfect example. Had a dip in Minnesota, had a bad season, changes teams, and he goes to elite. That was a little bit earlier in his career than Allen Robinson, but let's talk about another guy who had a similar situation, Kenny Golladay. Had some injuries in Detroit, had a down season, changes teams to the New York Giants, and his fantasy value, his dynasty value went from bad to worse. So for a guy at Allen Robinson's age, I think there are performance concerns. I think there are ability concerns. And I think there are team concerns in free agency because we don't know where he's going to go. We like to believe he's going to go somewhere, be the alpha, and get 150 targets. But who's to say he doesn't go somewhere to slide in as the number 2 option? And we see him get 100, 110 targets, and it's not the same Allen Robinson that we had in the past. So I think Allen Robinson's just a hold. I'm not super bullish on him. I'm not completely out. I think at this point, if you have him, you just have to go along for the ride and hope that that value bounces back a little bit.
I love that you brought up Kenny Golladay and the Stephon Diggs. The dichotomy between those two is huge. DeAndre Hopkins, another guy that a little bit older in his career.
Yeah.
On the downswing, but still definitely in his prime, goes to a new team, absolutely crushes it in 2020. Obviously this year dealt with injury. One more I want to throw out there is Keenan Allen. He is the quintessential version of this where they draft Justin Herbert, but coming into the season, Tyrod Taylor's the starter. Everyone's out on Keenan Allen in redraft, and he was a value. And the second, whether if it was Justin Herbert or not, he was still productive with Tyrod Taylor in those few starts that they did have. So I think he would have been a value either way. But these older veteran wide receivers, people want that new sexy name. And I think all of these guys, Kenny Golladay included, can be values at the right price. I'm willing to send a late second round pick for Kenny Golladay right now. Hope that with the firing of Joe Judge, maybe the retooling of that quarterback and offensive line situation, that the Giants can take a step in the right direction. But these are the type of guys that you can't just mortgage your whole future for a wide receiver because there's so many of them and they're so volatile week to week. But let's talk about an exciting splash quarterback. I know most of you in Dynasty Leagues are playing SUPERFLEX. If not, hit up that Discord. We can walk you through how you should be valuing QBs in those leagues. But let's talk about a guy that had to be my biggest hit of the season, which was Jalen Hurts. Was a guy that I was smashing on everywhere. Was a guy that I said was going to be a league winner. And he finished the season as the QB6 in fantasy points per game. He led the Eagles to a playoff berth that I don't think many people thought was going to happen this year. And if the current Jalen Hurts owner in your Dynasty League has any uncertainty that he won't be the starter next year, you have to buy. And I think if he underperforms in the playoffs, I think that opens up an even greater buy window for Hurts.
Yeah, you were ahead of me on Hurts. I'm all in now with Hurts as a buy. And honestly, the thing that made the difference to me was early in the season, we saw Jalen Hurts putting up production from a fantasy football perspective. But from an NFL football perspective, he had a lot of ups and downs. There were a lot of shaky moments, and the Eagles didn't look like a playoff team. Now, as the season's gone along, we've seen Hurts really put some things together and improve his play from just an NFL quarterback perspective and what the Eagles are looking for. We've also seen the Eagles string together some wins and get into the playoffs, which I think if I'm a GM, if I'm a coach, I want wins. Wins are the most important stat to me. So the fact that Hurts got them to the playoffs, to me, gives me so much more confidence and then moving forward with him as the starter into 2022 and beyond. So I am a buy on Jalen Hurts, and there are some people that are spooked out. There are some people that are thinking Deshaun Watson, that are thinking Russell Wilson, that who knows Aaron Rodgers. No one really knows what's going to go on with the Eagles, but I am fully convinced that they're going to commit to him for at least 2022 and see what he has in the tank. And who knows, we're recording this before wildcard weekend. Maybe he can show us something magical here in the NFL playoffs. And to me, it all just comes down to the upside. You have a rushing quarterback who went for over 700 yards and 10 touchdowns this season on the ground. That is something you can't find in most of the quarterbacks in Dynasty. You think about even the best pocket passers. You think about your Matt Staffords. I know Justin Herbert has some pretty good mobility. Joe Burrow can get out of the pocket as well. But those guys are pocket passers. They don't have the same level of upside that Jalen Hurts has because of his ability with his legs, especially when he gets to the goal line. He's kind of like that blend. He's that happy medium between Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton. He's got a little bit more elusiveness than Cam, not quite to Lamar's level. And then from just a power, get that first down on 4th and short, get into the end zone, he's a little closer to Cam Newton, but he's not quite there. And he's a little bigger than Lamar. So I think Jalen Hurts, with what he gives you with his legs, is an absolute buy. And the kind of names I think I'm throwing out for Jalen Hurts, like Matt Stafford is someone I have in a Dynasty League, and I'm thinking about just offering Stafford for Hurts straight up, because you look at Stafford, you think about the Rams, the passing attack, Sean McVay, Cooper Kupp, the whole 9 yards, and Matt Stafford really feels like a solid, safe quarterback in those leagues, but I'm not looking for safe, I'm looking for upside. So Stafford, even some of the young guys, Tua, I know there's questions about him, and some of the rookies from last year, your Justin Fields, your maybe even Trevor Lawrence, the whole 2021 class. Trey Lance, I think I would still take over Hurts at this point. But there's a lot of names in that young tier and then a lot of names in that mid to older age pocket passer tier that are still playing at an elite level that I certainly would be willing to move for Jalen Hurts.
What's crazy about Hurts is that he's shown growth this year in an offense that's still missing a true Alpha X wide receiver, in my opinion. I don't know if Devonta Smith can be that guy. I think he really be a great Z receiver, because Jalen Reagor is not that guy for the Eagles.
True.
And neither is JJ Arcega-Whiteside. So this is a team that needs to, again, address the outside playmakers on the roster. But even with that being said, Hurts is still the big arm passer he was in college. And coming into the league was a guy that you and I, or at least I did, comp to Josh Allen, because he had that brutal rookie season, sub 60% completion percentage, but he did have the efficiency through the air as far as how far his throws were going. Well, you look at Jalen Hurts, 3rd in air yards per attempt in 2021. We also saw in games he had to be a conservative, take what the defense gives him type of passer. I think that's led to some of the wins that we've seen on his resume, and that's where more of that growth has even come from. We did see that improvement, him getting to a 61% completion rate this season. Hopefully we continue to see that go up over the years as he continues to develop, only in year 2 and didn't get that many starts as a rookie. And we also saw Hurts put the team on his back with his legs. Averaged 10 carries a game over the course of the season. But we saw in games like against New Orleans, had less than 25 pass attempts, but 18 carries for 69 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. So even if you don't believe in Hurts, you know the fantasy points will be there. This year showed you that. And you and me and others have kind of perceived the Eagles to be wavering on if they're actually going to make Jalen Hurts the guy and give him that big long-term contract later on. And I think down the stretch this year, we did see the Eagles change their game plan and become a run-first team built to win games using Hurts' skill set. Just look at the fact that they were number 1 in run plays per game this year, dead last in pass plays per game. They're not going to run that unless they know what they have in Hurts and they want to get the most out of it. They're optimizing Hurts as a rusher. And I think part of the issues with the Eagles is they just didn't have the personnel to execute that offense all the time. This team still has a lot of pieces from that Carson Wentz era. So if I'm the Eagles front office, I'm thinking, look, we hit on a second-round quarterback. Let's push our chips in to try to compete coming out of a soft NFC East for the next 2 or 3 years. And in SUPERFLEX Dynasty leagues, I'm willing to pay as much as an early first and an early second for Jalen Hurts.
Wow.
In a non-SUPERFLEX, I'll move the late first for him. And I would 1,000% move the 101 in a piece for Hurts this season in SUPERFLEX.
So, Steph, next let's hit on someone that's been a little bit forgotten about. It's Travis Etienne, a very promising rookie from last year's class that went down to injury before the season even started. Haven't gotten to see him play a snap in a real NFL game. And Travis Etienne, to me, for obvious reasons, is a buy. You think about the hype that's going to come with the rookie class in 2022. Etienne is that forgotten about guy. But you got to think about it like this in a way. He said he's going to be fully recovered from that injury, ready to go for the 2022 season. So you almost think about it as, okay, if Travis Etienne had a quote-unquote redshirt year for his rookie season, didn't play, but still got to be in those meetings, still got to be in that NFL environment, not worrying about, class and things that he had to deal with in college. He's with Trevor Lawrence, who he played with at Clemson. How would we be valuing him if he was a rookie coming in with this class? And I don't think that value's changed all that much, even though he is a year older. So the Jaguars are clearly committed to Etienne, even if Urban Meyer's not the coach. The Jaguars did take him in the first round, and whatever staff comes in is going to see that draft capital, and his performance on the field is going to reflect that as well. So to me, Travis Etienne's a buy. I'll hit on him a little bit more later. But Steph, I want to hear your take on Etienne. And I know a lot of this is going to be repeating what we talked about in 2021 when he came out as a rookie, because not that much has changed, but I think it's important to revisit now because in a lot of ways, 2022 is going to be his redshirt rookie season.
Love the mindset and perception on him. I'd be willing to offer a late first rookie pick in a SUPERFLEX Dynasty League, which is just slightly lower than where he was going in drafts last year. You're just taking a little bit of that value off for the injury risk and a year older in age. He's almost 23. Means that he's going to hit his age apex after 2 seasons, but that's the same thing with Najee Harris, which people are touting as the Dynasty RB2 in some circles. So I think if you can buy Etienne, you have to. He still has RB1 upside as soon as next year. I value him in that Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins range, a high-end RB2. And don't forget, he has the first-round draft capital, which is the number 1 correlating factor for a breakout running back. He was comped by me and you and others to DeAndre Swift, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, coming out of college where he put up video game numbers. We're talking back-to-back 1,600 rushing yard seasons and 20-plus touchdowns as a sophomore and a junior. 1,500 yards from scrimmage as a senior, where he balled out in the passing game with a 12% target share from his buddy Trevor Lawrence, while maintaining his efficiency as one of the best backs in the NCAA. This guy's a home run hitter. He's an explosive playmaker. And it's going to be really hard for whoever the new head coach is of the Jacksonville Jaguars to look at what Etienne is going to do and not just want the ball in his hands. And here's the stat I dropped through all of last year's Dynasty rookie analysis that we were doing. Etienne scored 46 touchdowns in his college career. 24, so that's 52% of them, came from outside the red zone. And 17, which is 35% of those, were from 40-plus yards out. So this is a guy that will make plays, will break off those long runs. And then you add in the fact that J-Rob tears his Achilles. This James Robinson has to be one of the most unlucky high-profile players in the NFL. And with an Achilles injury, the earliest we've seen a guy come back, I think, I haven't spot-checked, as far back as the early 2000s.
Feels like it's Cam Akers.
It feels like it's Cam Akers, right. And he's already coming back with an injury that happened well before preseason even started. So J-Rob's probably out until at least mid-season next year. And this is a running back that now vacates 12 carries and 3.3 targets per game, a 9% target share. Jacksonville will likely be playing from behind next year and the year after based on how the rebuild is going this season. And the upside is there with Etienne because of the receiving work. Hopefully he maintains that explosiveness behind a Jags O-line that is rebuilding but has shown signs of life. We saw how the Jags played against the Colts to end the 2021 season. I'm sorry for you, Alex, that you had to drive to that game and watch your Colts get slaughtered.
Thanks.
And we've seen a running back be super productive in real life and in fantasy with James Robinson. So I think we know that the team can support that. The personnel can support that. I'm all in on Etienne still.
It's interesting. It's interesting because you look at Etienne, and I agree with you. I think that late first value, a 2022 late first in a SUPERFLEX league, makes sense. But first, that's all going to depend. We're still accumulating information on this rookie class. It's going to depend a lot on, where these guys get drafted. It's going to depend a lot on draft capital. There's prospects we really like, a couple running backs, probably 3 or 4 running backs that you and I are into, Steph. There's 5, 6, 7 wide receivers that have a shot to go first round, early second round in the NFL draft. And there's 4 or 5 quarterbacks that could float into that mid-late first round, even early second round. So there's a lot of names. There's a lot of things that need to get pinned in as we go through the NFL Combine, as we go through the Senior Bowl, as we get through pro days, get through that process. So it all depends on what this class is looking like as we head towards draft day and even coming out of the NFL draft into our SUPERFLEX league, Steph, what these what these rookie drafts are looking like. That's going to depend on that value for a 2022 pick. And once we have that pinned down, we're going to be able to slide Etienne right into our rankings and say, hey, if here's our rookie rankings, here's probably where I'd put Etienne. So that's where I'm going to value him, with my rookie picks. And I think in a lot of ways, you do have to give him a discount on his price because he is coming off an injury. He is a year older. We know how important that is for running backs. But in a lot of ways, he was going mid to early first last year. In a lot of ways, I think him missing this season, I'm not saying him missing his rookie year and getting injured helps him, but he avoided a pretty volatile situation in Jacksonville. His situation going into 2022 is going to be much better than his outlook was going into 2021 with the hindsight vision that we have, because he was walking into a situation with an incumbent workhorse back. He was walking into a situation where Urban Meyer was giving Carlos Hyde, 6, 7, 8 carries a game because he played for him back at Ohio State. And he was walking into an absolute train wreck of organization in 2021. So in a lot of ways, you look at 2022, and Etienne should be healthy off that injury. James Robinson is going to be coming off of a much more severe injury, so there's probably going to be more work available, and we'll see who they hire as a head coach. But my guess is the offense will be elevated next season. So I think Etienne, in a lot of ways, doesn't lose as much value as we think. And as we get into rookie draft rankings and things like that, we'll have to circle back on this topic and let people know just where Etienne slides into our rankings for 2022, and that'll help us evaluate exactly which rookie picks we'd really be willing to send off for Etienne.
Now let's end today's show talking about some quarterbacks. In SUPERFLEX leagues, a good quarterback is worth more than gold. We're talking about multiple first-round picks for the Justin Herberts, the Kyler Murrays, the Josh Allens. In most leagues, they're almost unattainable. Like, the guys who have them are like, why even risk that I don't hit on a pick to give up Mahomes or give up one of these high-profile names, Lamar Jackson, in that mix. So if you're looking to address that SUPERFLEX spot maybe even a QB1 spot if you do have one of those studs, there's always opportunities for dirt cheap buy lows for some quarterbacks that seem to have lost their value. Now, I'm not going to go out and tell you to buy Baker Mayfield, even though I think he's getting dragged through the mud, because I'm worried that the Browns may draft somebody out of this class on day 2. But one of the names that I can't seem to stop wanting to send offers for in Dynasty leagues, and I'm sending late seconds, early thirds for this guy, Jimmy Garoppolo. Because he's, one, not seen as a sexy name, even when he is the starter. He's a streamer at best for the 49ers. This is a guy that I think a team will take a chance on. He's not worse than 32 other quarterbacks right now in the NFL. And we're coming into a season where the Falcons need a quarterback. They're probably going to be in a rebuild. Look at the Jared Goff situation we just saw in Detroit, where they brought him in to fill in, to bridge that gap. Teddy Bridgewater, same type of way. We have the Steelers going to be in the market for a QB. The Giants in the market for a quarterback. And again, this quarterback class, there is no stud quarterback prospect, and there's not even a ton of good free agents that are going to be available in the market, Jimmy G being one of those, now that the 49ers have drafted Trey Lance. So I like the idea of a contender in the NFL going out and bringing in Jimmy G to just try to give them a chance. I think of the Broncos, I think of the Steelers as teams that need a guy like him to essentially keep their weapons afloat. The weapons are already there. The defense is there. They can push their chips in and at least be a strong playoff roster. So this guy I think is a buy low. Alex, what do you think? Am I out over my skis here on Jimmy G? Is he dust?
I fundamentally disagree with you. And it's not about Jimmy G. It's really not. It's just about how I think about my dynasty leagues, how I think about my SUPERFLEX leagues, and what it takes to win a league. Because to me, I look at Jimmy G, and I think everything you're saying is accurate from an NFL standpoint. If he ends up available, he could start for a lot of teams that are going to be looking for quarterbacks. I just don't think the upside is there. Like, I would rather have Gardner Minshew, honestly, because I think Gardner Minshew has more upside, and he's a lot younger at this point in his career. And I think about Jimmy Garoppolo. Let's see, he's had 5 full seasons in San Francisco, and his highest finish is QB 17. That was this year. So I think about Jimmy G, and he is a low-end streamer in fantasy football. So for me, I just can't get excited about Garoppolo. Yeah, maybe that 1 week when your other quarterback is on bye, you have to plug in Jimmy G. But in reality, if you're relying on Jimmy Garoppolo as one of your quarterbacks in a SUPERFLEX league, you're not going to win the championship. Maybe if the rest of your roster is absolutely stacked and you just need a starting quarterback, because your options are Jimmy G or some wide receiver 3 that you'd have to start in your SUPERFLEX spot. I get it. If you're in draft capital, a tough position from draft capital, and you have other quarterbacks that didn't work out, like, I get it. Maybe if you're a contender, accept that spot. You just have to plug him in there. That's the only scenario I can think of. But to me, I just don't see the upside for Jimmy G, and he's like a poor man's Derek Carr or Carson Wentz in a dynasty league. I don't even think the upside's at that level. Plus the volatility in San Francisco. If he changes teams, we really don't know what's going to happen. I'm willing to bet you there's not a lot of dynasty teams this season that had Jimmy G, Baker Mayfield, Teddy Bridgewater, that whole tier of guys starting in their roster. So that's the only hesitation for me. I get what you're saying, too, about like a late second, early third. That's a shot in the dark anyway. But there are just so many pieces I would rather have in a dynasty format than Jimmy Garoppolo heading into 2022.
You're certainly right from the upside perspective. Absolutely, because the names that we're talking about in that range, this year were Kenny Gainwell, who, I would take Kenny Gainwell over Jimmy G right now. But
Amon-Ra
was in kind of that mid to late second, but we're talking about third rounders. There's very few Elijah Mitchells out there. There's very few Pat Freiermuths out there that are going to deliver on that pick. In a lot of cases, people were taking Kyle Trask and Kellen Mond as these shot-in-the-dark quarterbacks.
But we'll see.
And yes, you're correct that the upside would be higher with the Kellen Mond. But the thing is, if I'm a contender, I'm happy to move off one of those guys and get a guy that can put up points this season.
For sure.
Now, in a lot of cases, what I'm not telling you to do is start Jimmy G every week. This is a guy that should be in a stable of streamable super flex quarterbacks. Again, because those high-end QBs are so hard to get your hands on, if you're in a place where you're streaming between Matt Ryan and Tua, well, add Jimmy G into that mix. See if he can help the overall point output, because quarterbacks do put up the most points relative to other positions across the board. He's a guy that can come in and fill a gap for you. So I think he is a buy low. People are acting like he's going to be a backup for the rest of his career. I don't think that's going to be the case at all, and that's why I think he's a value. But I'm curious what everybody else thinks. I think more folks are probably going to be on your side of this, Alex, and I'm completely fine with that. But let us know. If you've watched this far in the episode, let us know in the comments who you agree with on this Jimmy G take. Let's end it with two, really one, but we'll tack on one, maybe even two guys into this one. Rookie quarterbacks in 2021, Justin Fields primarily. But I think almost the same analysis that we're going to give you for Justin Fields can be copy and pasted over for Trevor Lawrence. Trey Lance is probably the only one of these three. Obviously Zach Wilson has tanked harder than the stock market in 2008. But Trey Lance is probably the only one that actually accrued some value. And part of that was he didn't start that much this year. And in the games that he did start, he got that rushing production that saved him from a fantasy perspective. But for Justin Fields, Alex, what's your value on him? And what's the mindset if you're going to go out and acquire him in your Dynasty League?
Yeah, I'm in on Justin Fields. I'm in on Trey Lance as well. And you said Lance's value accrued, but it's just because he didn't have time to screw up as a rookie quarterback. He had a couple of good starts against bad teams, and he was able to manage the game and use his legs, and that's what we saw from him. And I think his value might not have accrued just because I think a lot of people really wanted to see him start 8, 10, 12 games this season. So that's the only thing holding him back. If someone drafted him expecting that from him year one.
We got spoiled by this Justin Herbert.
We did.
This Baker Mayfield, like these guys that came in and produced in that first season. Because that's not normal in the NFL.
Absolutely. So I know there's kind of two camps. One, if someone was expecting that and they're just pissed about it, maybe they'll be willing to sell Trey Lance if they don't know what's going to happen with Jimmy G in the future. But most people that took him probably are saying, okay, I made it this far. I need to hold and see what I have in this guy because he showed some really good things when he was on the field. But I'm in on Justin Fields. We saw some rough outings early on in the season, especially that one against Tampa stands out in my head. He had a rough outing against Baltimore. He missed some games there at the end. But his last two starts against Green Bay and against Minnesota, 20 fantasy points against Green Bay, threw 2 touchdowns, 74 rushing yards. I mean, we saw him lead the Bears back to be competitive in that game as well, which you love to see. And then against Minnesota, 16.9 fantasy points is decent, but 26 for 39, 285, and 1 is not bad. And then 35 rushing yards as well, 420 rushing yards this season. In just 12 games, not all of which he played the whole game. So Justin Fields gives you that rushing upside. It's not quite Jalen Hurts level, but he could rush for 5, 6, 7, maybe even up to 800 yards any given season. Gives you that touchdown upside as well. So as we start to see this Bears offense hopefully put some pieces together, hopefully if they do get rid of Allen Robinson, they bring in another receiving threat to go alongside of Darnell Mooney. They're going to have a new coaching staff in there as well. I think all these things are working together to help Justin Fields and help his outlook. And again, this is similar to the Jalen Hurts conversation. Jalen Hurts is obviously a little bit more developed now in year 2, but I want that upside in my quarterback spot, and Justin Fields gives you that potential. I don't know if he's going to get there. He might not. But you talk about Trey Lance, you talk about Justin Fields. These guys have far more upside than your Zach Wilson, than your Mac Jones. You did a trade in one of our leagues, Stef, where you traded Mac Jones for Justin Fields straight up. And I thought that was a brilliant move. And that was before some of these good games from Justin Fields, just because you saw the potential in his upside. Maybe Mac's a better NFL quarterback for a longer period of time, but give me 8 years of an elite Justin Fields rushing quarterback than 15 years of a streamer Mac Jones. And I'm not saying that's what they're going to amount to be, but in a hypothetical world where that's like their most common range of outcomes, that's definitely what I would take. So even if Justin Fields isn't quite as good of an NFL quarterback, just that rushing upside, we've seen it time and time again. You look at the top guys right now in Dynasty, and it's Josh Allen, it's Lamar Jackson, it's Kyler Murray, it's Deshaun Watson when he's on the field. Like, all of these guys get it done with their legs, and that's just such a key piece to the puzzle. And for that reason, I'm willing to take a bet on Justin Fields and hope he turns into someone that can get it done for many, many more years.
Hey, Ed Hurts and Dak Prescott into that mix as well.
100%.
Those are guys that get it done with their legs too. So we know the value is there. Like, we don't need to beat you guys over the head with this. Rushing quarterbacks are amazing for fantasy. And the real opportunity that's presented to us as savvy dynasty owners is that if you got a guy that maybe doesn't know what he's doing or is just overreacting to the poor seasons from Fields and Lawrence, and maybe thought that, hey, these guys are going to be that Justin Herbert, that Kyler Murray produced for me right out of the gate, and they didn't get that, especially when they're spending the 101, the 102 in rookie drafts on these quarterbacks. This is the time to go and acquire them, and this may be the only time you get to acquire them if they come out of the gate hot in 2022. And for Justin Fields, I want to remind people how good this kid was as a prospect. In 2020, he was on pace over a 13-game season. You remember COVID kind of shortened the college football season. He would have had 3,400 passing yards, 36 touchdowns, 622 rushing yards, and around 7 to 10 touchdowns on the ground. And in 2019, he did have over 3,200 rushing yards, a 41-3 touchdown to interception ratio.
It's wild.
500 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns on the ground. So we're talking about a guy that reportedly has 4.4 speed. We maybe aren't necessarily talking about like Kyler Jackson, Kyler Jackson. We aren't necessarily talking about Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, but I love the Deshaun Watson comp for his rushing yards easily, where it's 35 to 70 rushing yards per game with a few rushing touchdowns sprinkled in. If this offense is even mediocre in Chicago, he's a QB1 as long as the wheels don't fall off, which we saw happen this season. And so, yeah, early first for Fields or TLaw. I'm taking that value all day. But, guys, I think that it's it for today's show. If you like what we do here, a like and a sub, greatly appreciated on YouTube. Keeps the wind in our sails. Hit that Discord channel to join the conversation and join some leagues with us. And I'm loving the memes we got going in there. I'm cracking up every single day when you guys are posting those memes in there. So let's keep it rocking and rolling. Appreciate y'all listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Peace.